Welcome back, my friends. For those of you that are new to my channel and you're here for the very first time, my name is Sherry and I live in Ontario, Canada, growing zone 5B, and this is week 2 of my gardening tours in the 2021 gardening season. It is my goal to show you new things every week in each video. However, there are always going to be some things that I show you because I want to provide you an update on the week previous, or I just want to show you how much growth has happened in the span of 1 week. Now, I was going to show you my Goblin plant first. However, as I walked over to this area to do this intro for the video, I noticed that this bush behind me is covered in pollinators. Let's take a look. These plants here are called the Goblin, and they've been planted on the outside of my pool fence. Now, they are a bit trampled right here. The puppies got into them last night and made a bit of a mess. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at these over the past year and thought I should just rip them out. I'm never going to get flowers from them. But take a look at this. How beautiful is this? It was well worth the year that I waited to get something from. And if I just pan back a bit, you can see that there are tons of blossoms that are going to be opening up in the next couple days. Some of you might be wondering why I would even consider ripping out these beautiful plants. And the reason that I've considered that numerous times, and when I say numerous times, it's like almost every time I walk past this area, I think I should just rip those out. And the reason for that is I grew these from seed last year and planted them out around this time last year in 2020. And I didn't get any flowers last year. And they just grew really big and bushy, almost like an overgrown weed. In fact, somebody asked me last year what that was. And I thought, why am I even putting this here? This part of the pool fence is actually a couple feet away from my driveway. So anyone driving into my driveway sees this area. And so it somewhat resembles a big weed area. Except this year, I'm getting blossoms on them. Now, there are some of them that I'm probably not going to get anything this year because, again, the puppies got into them and wrestled in and amongst them, and I don't know if they've killed them for this year or not. But the great thing about the Goblin plant is that it is a hardy perennial that can, take not being watered all the time. It loves the heat, and it will provide me these flowers all season long. So now that this one is flowering, I am so glad I didn't rip it out. The next thing I want to show you is an update on the strawberries. Now, I don't know if you can see in there, but I've got ripe strawberries all through. So at the end of the last gardening tour video, I showed you that these were all whitish green, and I couldn't wait for them to be ripe. Like, look at them in there. So I stopped videoing, ran inside, grabbed a bowl, and picked some strawberries for my son. I'm going to run these back inside. he can have them with his breakfast today, and we'll continue the tour. Look at them. So behind me here is one of my raspberry bushes that we have also around the pool fence. And so I have a lot of things planted around the pool fence. And for those of you that are new to my channel, the reason that I have so much planted around the fence is that in my area where I live, we have to have a fence around our pool. And I didn't want this ugly black chain link fence being an eyesore in my backyard, and thought, why not use 1.5 to 2 feet of space on the outside of the fence as gardening space. And then that way I have a natural trellising system already there to help me with whatever I want to grow. So again, behind me is my raspberry bush. Now it is really heavy and it's falling over. I don't know if I can show you this. You can see that I can like pick it right up. So it's fairly heavy and I don't want it to break. So one of the things I'm going to do is I have a bag of clips that I'm going to be using this year on my tomato plants so that I can actually keep them trellised up, and so they can just continue to grow and they're not all over the ground. And I thought these would be great to use on the raspberry bushes as well, the ones that are around the pool fence. And basically all I'm going to do is put the branch in here, clip it onto the fence, and call it a day. So I'm going to clip up this bush and clean it up so then that way it doesn't break off and I don't lose the possibility of a great raspberry harvest. Take a look at how well our sugar snap peas are doing. So I planted 2 different varieties and I mixed them up so that they would be all mixed together. Oh, look at this. Our very first sugar snap pea. And so we have the green ones and we have the purple ones. So my son just came out. This is the bowl. He said these are the best strawberries that he has ever had. Didn't even need to add sugar to them. Here, I'll give you the bowl back. Perfect, thank you. And put it in the bin for the chickens, okay? So a lot of you may not know that I do a lot of container gardening as well as my in-ground and my raised bed gardening. And the reason for that is I made a real conscious decision last year that all of my containers that I would be growing stuff in would be food. And the reason for that is I think that growing food plants or the plants that produce food can be really pretty as well. They provide nice flowers, they have beautiful leaves, some of them are variegated. And I just thought, why not grow a variety of things in my containers around the pool so that we could benefit from eating those things. And so I will probably do a separate video on my container garden. I think that it really does deserve to have its own. So right now we are heading into the high garden and I want to take a look at my black beans. I have 2 varieties. I have a regular black bean that is a bush variety and another one that is a vining variety. So let's take a look. This is the black bean area, and of course I've added in all of my garden signs so you can see that I have them going down each row. And then here we go. We just have the bush ones in the middle here, growing very healthy. On the outside with a different type of leaf is the vining one, and you can see the gorgeous flowers that are starting. And so like everywhere in my garden, I have planted the actual plants and then covered it with wood chips. And so here's more flowers. One of the things I wanted to touch on with you guys today was pruning your tomato plants. So I have all of my tomato plants on some kind of trellising system. Last year I used the Florida weave, and I have to tell you, I absolutely hated it. I just found that the areas where I used the Florida weave, it was so messy, and it was really hard to, twine or intertwine the string in between the plants, because they ended up getting away from me a little bit. I really tried hard to pull out all the suckers, but when you have a large gardening space and a lot going on in your life, it's really hard to get every single sucker that appears. And so I just found that using the cattle panel or the wired mesh to use them as a trellising system made it a lot easier and cleaner looking when I was trellising up my tomato plants. So behind me here, you'll see that I have that wired mesh that I was speaking of. And I have this probably, I'm going to say it's probably a good 18 inches off the ground. And so what that means for me is that I have to make sure that my tomato plants are pruned from the ground up as they grow. That way, it's not going to be really heavy and bushy, and there won't be any support until it gets to that 18 inches. So I want to make sure that all of the tomato plants I have reach that 18 inches before they start to fall over. So some of the things I do are removing all of the branches from the ground up to about close to the top, maybe the top 35% I leave, and I trim the rest. Essentially what that does as well is it allows that plant to put the energy into growing stronger roots and getting prepared to produce that fruit that we want. So this is a really good example here of needing to be pruned. And so I would just come along. Now, the reason that I say that this is really good, you can see that it has split here. And so what I'm going to do is actually take that whole side right off, because I don't want it to be split. And then I'm just going to go along and you can see this here is the sucker. So normally you would just pick that out of the armpit and throw it down, but I'm also going to take that off as well. This tomato plant here, it is a yellow furry tomato plant, and it's a really good example of needing to have been pruned before now. So you can see that if I was to straighten it up, it would be like that, but it's so heavy that it's falling over. Now, I'm also going to show you that this here, I'm still pulling out the volunteer tomato plants that I have everywhere. Okay, so to prune this one, I am going to just start removing the bottom leaves. And I'm actually going to take that one as well, and that one, and there we go. Oh, I left one on there. There we go. So I know you might think that I just destroyed my plant. However, had I been pruning it all along, this would have been cleared already anyways. And now all of the energy can go into growing a taller, stronger plant as well as stronger roots. And it probably has, probably another at least 6 to 8 inches before it can be trellised. So before we leave the the high garden, I just wanted to show you the asparagus ferns and how tall they already are. Now, as I'm walking down the row here, I'm actually walking past ferns that are bent over, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, bent over into the walkway already. So this here is an asparagus fern, and it's not done growing, and it's taller than me already. So when you're considering where you're going to plant your asparagus initially, you really have to take into consideration that eventually your asparagus patch is going to be ferns, and you can't cut these down thinking that you're going to allow the sun to access whatever else is growing around that patch, because you will kill your asparagus. You just have to tie it up. And so be really careful where you're going to plant your asparagus so that anything on the east or west, north or south side of this patch isn't going to be blocked. So let's head over to the waist-high raised beds. Couple things I want to show you there. So one of the things that I did differently this year is I didn't really account for growing green beans. And we actually love green beans, but I didn't know where really to put them. And I kind of made a decision that I would plant out the garden with all of the seedlings that I had grown. And then I would just direct sow my green beans wherever I thought that it would be good. Now, having said that, there is one area that I direct sowed green beans and lettuce. So I'm probably gonna have to go and pull out the lettuce because it's getting a little bit too warm for it anyways, but let's take a look. So here is one area that I've planted green beans, and you can see that the plants are coming up and they're really healthy. In behind them here we have lettuce. I couldn't even tell you what variety it is. I must have just been having a week where I planted and then saw that nothing was growing and thought that it was bare space. So this here is bed 2. These are all of my radishes. I just want to see if I can get a good one to show you. Oh, here's one. So this is the white golden radish. Let me see if there's another one. Okay, oh, and I also did I think they're white fingers, but I'm not 100% sure. Let me see, I think I only did the 2 kinds in here. And so if we go up to bed number 1, you can see in here that I have tons of radishes planted here, and they're all doing really well. Let me see again. I'm gonna see, I can't recall now. Yep, I did pink ones all through here. Here is a look at bed 3 from the west side, and you'll see all along here I have a bunch of bok choy. Some of it is actually going to seed. I've been pulling off the leaves and using them in salads as well. I just planted way too much this year and we just haven't been able to eat it all. This here are some beets, and this is not a beet. Let me just pull that out. I have 2 different kinds of beets here. I believe these ones might be the deep or the bullseye one. I can't recall. These ones here may be the golden beets. I know that I have the albino beets in bed 1. And so you'll also notice that my onions have had their second or third haircut now. I can't recall, but they are doing really well. They're nice and strong and they feel good. And so here is one of my tromboncino plants. And we'll just see. Oh, this is probably the start of one. That's super exciting. It's very exciting. It's exciting because I have a lot of pests that are really liking these plants. And you can see just by the leaves here. To give you an update on the yellow sticky pads that I stuck in everywhere that I saw the squash beetles, you can see here from what I'm showing you that there are not a lot of beetles stuck to that sticky pad. So it appears that they are collecting everything else other than the pests that I want them to. So one thing I wanted to show you are these. These have taken weeks to come up. And this is Malabar spinach. And I'm so excited for that to be growing. Okay guys, so we're heading over to the original raised bed garden. And I have a little bit of disappointment in this garden. So I took a risk and I planted my Brussels sprouts in the low raised beds. Now I know that we have wildlife everywhere here, and I'm really sad to say that I don't think that I'll be getting any Brussels sprouts this year. Take a look. This was the bed where I planted my Brussels sprouts, and you can see that there is a whole area of blank space. That's where the Brussels sprouts were. And so if I get up real close to one that's here, you can see that it has been eaten. Here's another one right off. They actually chewed the tops right off. So it looks like we have one lone survivor. However, it does look like there has been some pest damage to the lower leaves. So it may be a wait and see kind of game with that. So here my marigolds have come back to life and they are just gorgeous. Behind them we have a bunch of zinnias that have popped up, and then the eggplants that I planted a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, I think. Geez, the time is just blending for me. They seem to be doing really well. I think I may show you these dahlias every week, because every time I come over here, they are more beautiful. Look at them. So gorgeous. No, in my video, my week 1 tour, I told you that the beetles hadn't made it here. Look at this flower. This is really disappointing. Unfortunately, I thought I pressed record. Basically what I did was I actually scooped the flower into the palm of my hand with all of those beetles in it, and I just made a fist and squeezed and twisted and took that flower off and killed all of those beetles. Behind me is one of the areas where I've planted my garlic. Now, I planted 650 garlic cloves back in the fall of 2020, and this is just one area of it. I made a conscious decision last year that I was going to plant things around the pool fence garden that would be a little bit tidier than doing the tomato plants. The tomato plants were horrible on this fence because they were growing through the fence, dropping tomatoes on the pool deck. It was a mess. And so this year I said to myself, nope, we are going to plant garlic because it's hardneck garlic. It will come up, it'll be beautiful green shoots, and it'll look perfect. Now, some of you might be thinking that I'm crazy for growing 650 garlic. But what that means for me is that some of this year's harvest will actually be used to plant next year's harvest. And essentially, if I have a good harvest every year, I do everything like I should be doing, I shouldn't have to buy garlic ever again. And when I say ever again, what I mean is I should never have to buy garlic to plant in my garden again. The one time that I spent on, buying all of the garlic should be the only time I should have to do that. So fingers crossed, everything turns out well and I have a great garlic harvest. This area here on the outside of the pool fence is where I planted all of my dahlias. And I don't see anything coming up just yet, except for this right here, this volunteer squash or melon plant, as well as right here. So for those of you that didn't see my compost nightmare video, I explained that we used some of our compost out of one of our bins, and I don't think that it had spent enough time in there, or that it didn't get hot enough for a long enough period of time. And I was getting volunteer squash or melon and tomato plants everywhere that I used that compost. And so I did use some of that compost over there for the dahlias, and so we have some volunteer plants there as well. Now, I have decided that I am going to let them grow. I'm going to let those 2 volunteer plants grow so we can see exactly what they are. I thought that might be a kind of a fun thing to do this summer. So I'm going to try my best. For every gardening tour that I do, I want to touch on every gardening space that I have. So I'm currently in the food forest, and I thought this would be a great time to take a peek at a couple of the annuals that I've planted here. Now, when I was growing my seedlings and looking at my gardening blueprint of what I was going to plant and where, as any gardener knows, you get scared and you plant extra seeds. So I ended up with some extra seedlings that I could not dispose of and decided that I would put them in here in the food forest. So to finish off this gardening tour today, I want to show you how those annuals are growing and what they are. Thanks for spending time with me. Off to the north of the food forest, I planted 4 squash plants. So if we start on the right side here, oh, this is so soft, almost furry like. So this is a variegated butternut orange squash plant, and the next 3 beside it are khaki squash pumpkins. So let me just see in here. Oh, look at that. We even have one that's already started. Very cool. And we have some flowers in here, and everything looks really healthy. And I want to, knock on wood, not jinx myself, but I don't have beetles up here.